Welcome to Influential Entrepreneurs, bringing you interviews with elite business leaders and experts, sharing tips and strategies for elevating your business to the next level. Here's your host, Mike Saunders.
Hello and welcome to this episode of Influential Entrepreneurs. This is Mike Saunders, the Authority Positioning Coach. Today we have back with us Jay Winestein, who's the founder of DeepDive Retirement, and we'll be discussing taxes in retirement. Jay, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks for having me again.
Well, I think taxes in retirement, that's about a 4-hour session for part 1, 2, 3, and 4. So let's strap in for 16 hours of content because, wow, that's a broad topic. But I know that you've got it dialed into just some good learning nuggets that you advise your clients on. So tell us a little bit of an overview when you have a client that comes to you and says, hey, tell me about retirement and how are my taxes going to be impacting that? Where do you start?
Well, it's a good question. The first place to start is depending upon where you are, either a pre-retiree, soon to be retired, or you're in retirement. We want to take inventory and we want to really break down. Most people have their assets by broken down by, who the broker is or what type of investment. And so what I do is I take that and extract it and say, what tax class is this pile of money or investment or this account, whatever it is? Let's plot it by tax category. There are basically 4 tax categories. If you want to add in HSAs, which people use, that's a 5th tax class, but most people don't have a lot of money in there. And so we've got to take inventory and see where the allocation is per the tax category. All right. And then if you're a pre-retiree, we want to see where you're putting your money. If it's a 401k, if it's a Roth 401k, if it's some kind of brokerage account, if you're using an annuity, or if it's some kind of tax deferred account or something, whatever it is, we want to see where you're putting your money so we can project out and see where your income would be levels, but also where your taxable liabilities lie. And because if we don't know where you're projecting out, then it's hard to make any improvements.
It's like they say, there's only 2 things guaranteed in life: death and taxes. And taxes don't go away. Right. So it's not like, cool, I paid my fair share and now I'm age X and no more. Nope. We know that's there. And I think there's a lot of, in my opinion, misconceptions where people go, oh, you know what? I'm going to just defer that till retirement because I'm going to be in a lower tax bracket in retirement. Well, we don't know that. We don't know what bracket you will be in, and we don't know what the tax rate will be in that time frame. So that's exactly what you were just talking about with your categories and what type of money is placed in these categories. And is it smarter to wait until retirement? ? And it's going to be case by case for everybody. So I think that is such a huge thing for people to keep in mind. There could potentially be some cases to say, why don't you pay your taxes on it and right now, and then let's put it into something on the front end 10, 15, 20 years before retirement. But there's not a cookie cutter template formula.
That's right. And the thing about it is you hit it on the head where most people think that they'll be in a lower tax bracket. That was the whole idea in the 80s when tax brackets were high and tax deductions were a dime a dozen. We had the tax shelters, the 2, 3, 4 to 1 write-off. We had, the 401ks really came into vogue and you can defer money. And the idea was, I'm in a high tax bracket now and I'll be at a lower tax bracket later. Well, there's something wrong with that mindset because number one, tax brackets actually have come down quite a bit and we're in the lowest tax brackets in the history of taxation. You may not seem that way, but it's true. And, there are many people that have $500,000, $1 million, or $2 or $5 million in qualified plans, and they're going to be drawing a lot of income, and they're going to be at a higher tax bracket when they retire. And
so, that old adage that stuck in our mind from the 80s
exactly
ain't accurate today.
Yeah. And the other thing too is that why would you, even if whatever the tax brackets are, it doesn't matter, but why would you want to be in a lower tax bracket when you retire? That means you're making considerably less money, if all things being equal. you'd want to be matching your pre-retirement income or more in retirement. You want to enjoy life. You don't want to be hurting for money simply because you want to be in a lower tax bracket. So there's a lot wrong with that theory or that mindset that you're going to be in a lower tax bracket. And it's going to come. It can be a rude awakening for people once they retire.
Yep. That's a good point. So as always, got to plan ahead and plan well ahead. Don't just plan a handful of years ahead. So plan ahead, have a plan, and be allocating certain monies in different buckets. And what should those buckets be? Question mark. That's where someone like yourself will guide the process, show options, give pros and cons. But what you mentioned, 401k came into vogue, and 403bs and those kinds of things that are, employer, sponsored. What's it look like for someone that's, a little bit on the higher income side that has some of those larger accounts that have grown over the years? What are they going to be facing when they're now entering into retirement with that money? They have to do something with it.
Right. Well, again, very, very good point. And it needs to be looked at on a case by case basis. A lot certainly can be done to mitigate and completely or almost completely wipe out taxes. I do want to add one thing a little bit off the topic. And a lot of people don't realize this. They do when they retire and they start collecting Social Security. And that is the fact that Social Security income gets put into a blender with all your other sources of income. And for most of us, their Social Security income is going to be taxable as well, almost all of it. And that's a piece of information that is sort of a rude awakening, because you're paying taxes and FICA taxes into the system all these years. And then when you receive it, thanks to both Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, that both signed off on this, Jim, they both agreed that Social Security should be, if your income level is over certain thresholds, which they include half of the Social Security as part of that threshold, believe it or not, your Social Security is going to show up on your tax return as taxable income. And that's due to the fact that you have other income, like coming out of pre-tax 401ks and IRAs, that is considered earned income on your tax return. You're now over the certain threshold, which is not very high. It's $25,000 to $40,000 in that range, married and single people. And again, half of the Social Security is included in that. And so it's right away, you're paying a lot more taxes than you ever thought you would be. But I do want to get back to the high income earner, is that most high income earners are stuffing a lot of into the 401k, the pre-tax, because the tax deduction is important and it looks good. But what people need to realize is that you're inhibiting your liquidity, and I want to get into that in a little bit, but because you can't take the money out without taxes and penalty at that point, and that it's going to lose. You can lose 40% or more of your money on any withdrawals, so it's not liquid, and it's going to be fully taxable at retirement. And one of the issues there, again, we talked about, am I on a lower or higher tax bracket? But let's say you're in the same tax bracket. Well, it's even hard to tell that, because we don't know what tax brackets are going to be. Trump's tax cut expires in 2025, I believe. And after that, who knows what the tax brackets are going to be. So you're running some risk there. And that's something that is worth taking a look at.
Agreed. And, I don't live in your world of retirement planning and financial planning and markets and all that, but I always remember this from I don't know, some seminar I attended. So tell me if this sounds pretty accurate. Hey, what's the best stock to pick? Who knows, right? Throw a dart at a stock chart and pick one and hope for the best. I don't know. But it's been said that Warren Buffett said, here's an indicator of what stock could be a good one to pick. If you're driving down the road and you see a store where the parking lot's always full, or a restaurant always full, maybe that's a good stock to look into, to evaluate. So with that thought in mind, I'll tell you my opinion of whether the tax rate or brackets are going to go up or down in the future. Well, there's this little thing called a deficit. And if we are running trillions of dollars in deficit, like underage, and we owe a bunch of money and we can't close the gap, where else is the government going to get the money to pay that deficit and pay the government's bills? Taxes. So, it doesn't guarantee, oh, here's what the tax bracket is, but it just is an indicator that when we keep hearing the news of the deficit being in the trillions of dollars and growing, we're probably not going to stand to hope that our taxes are going to go down anytime soon.
Yeah. You can go to usdebtclock.org and see, I think we're in the $30 trillion of debt. And $1 trillion, I can tell you, is a lot of money by itself. Just $1 trillion. They say if you go back to Jesus Christ days and you factored in $1 million a day till today, you'd be at about $800 or $900 billion. You wouldn't even hit $1 trillion, let alone 30 trillion. It's a lot of money. And it's the tax, it's smoke and mirrors. I mean, they just find ways to increase the debt and increase the interest on the debt that we owe to the bondholders, international bondholders, and it just it's above my understanding. But the point is that the taxes are going to have to be paid back at some point, and or do they? I don't really know. It's kind of a mystery to everyone. I don't know anyone that knows the answer to these things, but. Nope. On an individual basis, you want to mitigate your taxes. You want to reduce them, wipe them out. And there are some techniques that you can use to do that. And, we can chat about that a little bit and start the conversation there if you like.
Of course. I mean, obviously, we're not going to make recommendations or get in the weeds because it is a case by case and everyone is going to have a different opportunity and scenario. But I always love when people use the correct word, like mitigate, not eliminate, because no one can guarantee we can eliminate your taxes because everyone has to pay their fair share. But if we can mitigate or lower as much as possible or make the right moves that are standardly done, readily, approved and received, let's do those kind of things. And that's where working with someone like yourself, you can present those to clients. So yeah, I mean, what are some of the things you typically would be advising your clients when it's when they want to look at lowering taxes as much as possible?
Well, yeah, there are several things. The first thing is to consider, depending upon what stage you're at, pre-retiree or retired, is to look at Roth conversions. It depends on what your income levels are. Sometimes it wouldn't make sense to do a Roth conversion and pay a lot of taxes on a $500,000 account, let's say, because maybe the income that you're living on is low and you're in a low bracket, and having to convert that large chunk of money and pay a lot of tax on it just simply may not make sense. So it really depends on where a person is at asset wise. But that is one possibility. The other is, if you're still working, is to start putting money into post-tax accounts, Roth IRAs or brokerage accounts, instead of fighting for that tax deduction like many of us are. Let's look at more after-tax strategies so that when we do draw out principal monies, it's not going to show up on our tax return. Realize the issue that most people have is that the more money they accumulate in any kind of account, almost except the Roth type accounts or Roth treatment accounts, the more assets you accumulate and the more money you have, the higher is your tax liability, right? So if you have $100,000 account, well, you have a $20,000 liability. But if you have, $3 million in an account, you have $1.2 million in tax liability in that account, right? It grows
because you kicked into a higher bracket. A
higher bracket, plus just the fact that, and you've got to get that money out. And if you leave it to your heirs, they're going to pay the taxes on it. Yep. Somebody's going to pay tax on it. But there's other ways to mitigate it. Using different products. We have clients that use the cash value of life insurance because there's no limits to how much you can put on there. and we can bang the death benefit down if you don't really need life insurance to a very low number, so that we now have the cash value. And Ed Slott talks about it, and many other people talk about the cash value buildup in the life insurance has a Roth tax type tax treatment. It's not a Roth IRA, but it's after tax money's going in, and you can get them all the money out, including the gains, without generating a 1099. And that's the main issue: is to find ways to access monies without generating a 1099, or to find ways to pay the taxes with monies that you've found. For example, we in other interviews that we've had, we talked about life expectancy credits, and to have money that's socked away for long term that gains and gains and gains and gains the income potential. And then if it's money that we don't really need because we have our income already set, we can now start to draw money out from these other accounts with high life expectancy credits and high payouts, and use that to pay the taxes on your distributions from your qualified accounts, from your IRAs, and even brokerage accounts. So in all, it's very individualized. It depends on the asset level that you have, and it depends on what other needs you have, whether it's familial, you need life insurance coverage or not, or you want to make sure assets are passed on to the next generation through a life insurance tax-free benefit. There's many things. It's very hard to just give you a formula and say this is the way you do it, but we know what the tools are. We know what we have available to us, and we can try various different things.
And the proper combination of those tools. So I think whenever I hear people like yourself speaking of these things, it just embeds in my mind, this is not something that you go to Google and go click, set up, done. Because it is so individualized, case by case. And here's a tool that's great. This is a tool that's great. Here's another account type tool that's great. But maybe it's used in combination, or a certain percentage of your portfolio goes into this. It's never a cookie cutter, do it yourself type of a situation. And that's where I feel like someone like yourself that just studies this all day long and all the ramifications and is able to show people, here's some things to consider. It doesn't matter what you choose, but here's some pros and cons to consider.
Yeah, that's what I think you get when somebody who is an engineer or whatever they do, medical professional, they say, I want to research it. Well, they go on Google and start researching it. Yeah. What you generally get when you do that, because I do that too, to see what is being said or what additional information I get, you generally just get cookie cutter answers. And, I just think it doesn't really help you that much. It gives you some ideas, or gives you ideas of what questions you should ask, but it would be hard to get a very specified plan or information of how you can improve your condition, because the information is very generic that you find on the internet, and that sort of thing. I mean, it's worthwhile, but it's not going to, I don't know how much it's going to help, really.
Yeah. You mentioned liquidity, Jay, and I think that is, cash is king. And we hear that in all kinds of situations financially. Cash is king. Well, I want to have you talk a little bit about that as we wrap up this conversation. And it kind of makes me think of, if let's just use as an example. And I know that you're not talking about paying down the mortgage on a house, but I was in the mortgage industry a couple decades ago, and people would say, hey, I want to start chunking down and paying extra on the mortgage. And they start taking all their ready cash and putting it on the mortgage. And now 3, 4, 5 years later, they paid it down quite a bit, but they're cash poor. And it's all locked up in their home equity that they now need to go borrow against to get. So when you're talking to clients about putting their money in accounts, liquidity is going to be key, because if you put it in a certain type of account, it's not easily readily available to pull back out without consequence, tax, penalties, things like that. So talk a little bit about liquidity so that you can make the most of your retirement growth, but also have access to it in case you need it.
Well, right. The most successful people I see and work with and do myself move money. You want to accumulate money, but you also really don't want it sitting in one place, because that's not what the banks do, right? And the insurance companies and the large, and successful entrepreneurs, they're always putting a down payment on a piece of real estate that generates cash flow. And they take that cash flow and they buy another property, or they put it back into an account and they reestablish that account, and then they move that money out to a small business entity, or whatever it is that they do. And so you want to have money, a lot of money, liquid, because there are investment opportunities that may be very, very advantageous for you. You might have a relative that's got a great idea and they need some cash, $50,000 or $100,000 of cash, and you're confident that it's going to be a winner. You never know, but risk is the way you develop wealth is you expand out your money into different places, businesses, properties, stock market, insurance. You want to utilize all of these different things, right? There's no one product that is perfect for everybody, right? It's just a matter of having options and having choices from where to get money and to move it someplace else. A lot of successful people, I work with a lot of federal employees and state employees, and they're plowing all their money into the 401k, 403b, and they have no liquid cash. And it's a conversation that we engage upon, and of course we make changes. But that is something that I think the listeners may learn something from it. If they do, to learn how to develop other types of assets, because you never know what's going to happen in one particular market or segment of the economy. And you want to make sure you're diversified, not only in specific stock investments, like a lot of investment advisors talk about, but to diversify in the types of investments you have, and to diversify in the types of tax categories that you have, because we don't know what tax brackets are going to be, liquidity issues. And again, it's a very personalized basis, and it's hard to give specific examples right now, but I just want the listeners to understand that diversification is multifaceted, if you will.
Yep, but 100%. And one diversification setup strategy, if we looked at it at a glance, would look very different from one client to the next, because it is very individualized. What does this client need? What is their how many years before retirement? All of those things are going to be different. So being diversified lets you take a hit in one type of category and still maintain your momentum, because it didn't knock the legs out of you. So I think that's so huge and wise to think about, because I think someone listening to this would go, that makes sense. That's safe. That I'm protected if I'm diversified.
Right. Well, one example would be, like, a quick one would be that somebody wants to retire at 60 or 62, and they're really not eligible for the full Social Security benefit, right? This full retirement age is 67 or 66 in 10 months. And that's like income that you would expect to have, but you don't have it. So we have to wait for that individual to apply and get the full retirement benefit from Social Security. Well, we need money in the meanwhile to float yourself to get you to that point easily. So we're going to need income from other sources. And if we're using IRAs or 401k money, that's all going to be taxable, and that's going to hurt. So we want to have after-tax money that's liquid, that can float us for those 3 or 4 years while you're waiting to kick into Social Security at the full retirement age, or even push it back to age 70, because the payout's a lot higher. So these are kinds of things we evaluate and look at and see according to an individual's goals and what they're trying to accomplish.
Well, Jay, I think this has been really, really helpful to help clarify some of these.
I hope so.
Clarity meaning there's a lot to know, and no one person is meant to understand every single aspect, but you need to realize that you can't avoid taxes. There's plans to be put into place. Everyone is different, and see what it looks like for you. So if someone is curious about that, what's the best way they can reach out and connect with you?
Right. Always feel free to click on the the button on the page to get to my calendar. Just feel free to book a no cost, no obligation one-on-one. We can talk over the phone. We can do a Zoom call. My phone number, the best number, is 602-448-0263. you can email the main email address, DeepDive, like DeepDive retirement at Gmail. I use Gmail because I travel and it's just easy to get on there and not have to worry about servers and all that kind of thing. So any way that you can contact me that works for you, just feel free and we'll set up a time to take a look at your situation and without any cost or obligation. No worries.
Sounds good. Well, Jay, thank you so much for coming on today. It was a real pleasure talking with you again.
Well, same here. Thanks for having me, Mike. I do appreciate it.
You've been listening to Influential Entrepreneurs with Mike Saunders. To learn more about the resources mentioned on today's show or listen to past episodes, visit www.influentialentrepreneurssradio.com.